Welcome to this Ministerial eGovernment conference. You may be wondering why the word ministerial has been added to the title. It's because as we speak, upstairs in this very building, the whole bunch of European ministers are putting the final touches to the declaration on eGovernment, which will be jointly signed this afternoon before the plenary sessions. The event is being live streamed, so make sure that you're smiling all the time and your hair is perfectly combed. You can also use Twitter if you want to, if you find the interventions interesting enough. There are two hashtags that you absolutely have to use. eGov17, lowercase e, capital GOV 17, and the Estonian presidency's hashtag, which is lowercase EU 2017, lowercase ee for Estonia. As you will see from the program this morning, ahead of the afternoon's plenary sessions, we have two sets of parallel sessions, workshops. If you want to be listening to the discussion on information operations and fake news in the digital age, you're in the wrong room, but it's too late. We can't actually lock the doors, but you've now committed to being present in this room. But more seriously, our sessions here, first of all about technology for borderless government, and then after the coffee break, we'll move to the policy framework dimension of e-government. Each speaker has been given a slot of about 20 minutes. They may underrun or overrun that time with about 5 minutes for questions. There's a clock here you can't see, but they can, to make sure they don't go too much over time, because I'll be in the front row and I'm too far away to give them a gentle kick if they go over time. And I think my final piece of housekeeping is to remind you, you've probably seen it outside breakfast, there's a very impressive exhibition area all over there, so do make sure that you, in the spare moments that are available to you after having had your coffee, that you look around the exhibition area and engage with the exhibition people there. I'm sure they'd enjoy having a conversation with you. So it now reminds me simply to introduce the three speakers for this introductory session. We're going to hear from Dominique Escoffier about the government of things and virtual government. I've asked Dominique to explain, and he's confirmed he will, a bit about what he does and the concepts behind his presentation. But very briefly, as I've been briefed, he's the co-founder of EUVR.org, a European VR association, a virtual reality association, and VR manager of NVIDIA Corporation. So that's my job done, and Dominique, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thanks to the ministry for the invitation, and thanks to all of you for arriving so early in the morning. If the people in the tech can switch to my slides, that would be amazing. There we go. My topic today is virtual reality. I'm the head of virtual reality for the EMEA region at NVIDIA, that's Europe, Middle East, Africa, and India. And I'm a huge virtual reality and tech enthusiast. I'm going to tell you, because it's early in the morning, I'm going to start slow with a couple of high-level examples of how virtual reality is right now already has implications for the normal life of citizens, and then give a couple of examples of industries that are already being changed by virtual reality, and then end up on e-government solutions that use virtual reality to change the way the government interacts with citizens. I have kind of a hard problem though, because talking about virtual reality is like dancing about architecture. So my question to all of you is, how many of you have already heard of virtual reality? That's good. How many of you have actually experienced virtual reality? And how many of you are working on an active project with virtual reality? Thank you, thank you. My goal today is to change that. That in a year or 2 years or 3 years, a lot of hands will go up that use virtual reality to talk directly to their citizens. So again, talking about virtual reality is kind of hard. You really have to experience yourself how powerful the medium is. So dancing about architecture in virtual reality looks a little bit like this. And to give you guys another example of how powerful virtual reality is, this is a video of 5 times world snooker champion Ronnie O'Sullivan
What are you going for?
playing a virtual game of pool and falling over because he believes that the table in front of him is real.
No.
And that's the magic of virtual reality. It really tricks your brain into thinking you're suddenly in another place and the things around you are solid. And because virtual reality is such a powerful experience, I believe that virtual reality will change people's lives. So hi, my name is Dominic Escoffier. I'm the head of virtual reality for the EMEA region at NVIDIA. I'm also co-founder of EUVR, which is a non-profit organization to help the European virtual reality ecosystem. I also founded a company in virtual reality together with 2 experts that we brought through an accelerator program in Silicon Valley. So I know how fast the train is already moving on the other side of the pond. And this is also one of my goals today, is to really wake up the energy for all of you to also help drive virtual reality, because it's a very young industry. So I started 5 years ago when I tried an early prototype of the Oculus Rift. It was literally a piece of tech from a garage in California held together with duct tape. So this, what you see on the screen, is actually a more advanced version of that kit. This was 4 years ago. And ever since then, I did everything I could to make virtual reality a thing. Because I actually believe that virtual reality will not only become a huge industry, but it has wider implications. So if you take a look at the latest numbers, actually virtual reality is already a multi-billion-dollar industry. If you look at the numbers from 2017, you'll see that already 7.17 billion US dollars are generated in revenue in the virtual reality industry, and it's bound to go up to 75 billion US dollars in 2021. So for those of you who think that virtual reality is just a gimmick and it's not here to stay, this slide should prove you wrong. And again, I actually go a step further. I believe that virtual reality will create a better humankind. And I'm going to tell you why. First of all, virtual reality will prepare you better for your future. Second, it will make you more healthy. And third, it has the potential to make us smarter. So let's dive right into that first topic. And I'm going to start off with a very personal example. This is my brother, my sister-in-law, and her 2 nephews. There's actually a 3rd child included in that picture that has in the meanwhile arrived. And they've bought a house from the 60s that they're now renovating to grow their young family in. And after a long day of helping my sister-in-law renovate the house, I talked to her and said, well, you have a great garden, it's an amazing house, and once you add that addition to your house, it's going to look amazing. But she said that she can't really imagine what it's going to look like just by seeing a 2D blueprint. So I thought, well, virtual reality offers the solution for that problem. Because in virtual reality, you can visualize things in completely new ways. So what I did is I took the old house, I built a quick model in SketchUp, and then I ran it through Iris VR, which is a tool that allows you to take your SketchUp drawing and actually walk through that in virtual reality. So for the first time, my sister-in-law was able to move inside of her future house to see whether the guest toilet, for example, is big enough. For the first time, she was able to step inside this room that, again, it feels super real. Virtual reality really makes you feel like you're suddenly standing in another place. And in VR, you can do even crazy things, like change the setting of the sun. So if you want to see what your dining room is going to look like in the early morning, you have the ability to do so in virtual reality. Check out the reaction from my sister-in-law. This is after she took off the headset and after, for the first time, she saw the house that her and her small family will be living in for the next couple of years, maybe for the rest of her life. And she literally had tears in her eyes because it was such an emotional moment for her. And what I found interesting is that right now the 2D blueprints are just lying on the floor. They're like a piece from an older time. So this is how virtual reality can prepare you better for your future. It can give you a glimpse into the house that you might be living in and really result in an emotional reaction. But it can also make you healthier. So let me tell you the story of José Luis Mosso Vázquez. He's a researcher and general surgeon at the Universidad Panamericana, and what he does is he jumps in his Jeep and drives up to remote mountain towns where there are no clinics available. And what he does is he uses virtual reality to distract his patients from the pain and the anxiety they have during those surgeries. So instead of seeing the surgery being done live in front of them, they're distracted. They put a VR headset on their head, and then they can roam around an underwater seascape. They can roam around the ruins of Machu Picchu, and so get distracted a little bit from the stuff that's happening to them. And what Jose found is that patients using virtual reality experience 24% less pain and anxiety, which means that you can save on the general cost of surgeries up to 1/4, because you can use less sedatives, which again is great for the healthcare system and also for the general prices of surgeries. But VR actually can do much more in the health sector. It can actually help paraplegics walk again. And instead of explaining this, here's a short 40-second video that explains it much better than I can. And there should be sound. Thank you. Best thing about the study is that 100% of the patients that took part in the study were reclassified from from quadriplegic to just being paralyzed, which not only means they can move their legs to a certain degree, they actually get body functions back like bowel control, so they can do their daily routine just like a normal person can, which is of course an incredibly valuable thing for them. So that was the health part. But virtual reality can actually make us smarter, because students perform better when they learn with virtual reality. There was a recent study done in China that showed that if you do a virtual reality lesson, the students actually perform 27% better than the non-VR group. Even better than that is, if you do the same test 2 weeks later, the numbers go up to 32%. So that means that you not only learn faster in virtual reality, you actually retain that knowledge for a longer time, which obviously is the holy grail for education. And what's even cooler than that is 100% positive reception among students. So they love it, they really want to engage with new technology. It's something that brings a little bit more joy and a little bit more interest to the topic at hand into the classrooms. So with this, I wanted to show you that virtual reality has the ability and the potential to change a lot of industries. I just named these 3 industries because I believe that they are very inspiring examples of what virtual reality can do, what the potential and what the power of this new medium is. But because you're here for the eGovernment conference, I want to give you a couple of examples where virtual reality could also change the way a government works. But before I do that, this is what education looked like 25 years ago. This is a TV series from France called Once Upon a Time Live. And this is how I learned about the human body, about biology 25 years ago. Some of you might remember this. It's a very famous show from Europe. And when I was a kid, I actually dreamt of being inside of one of these pods and having the ability to travel inside of the human body and learn about the human body and about biology. And some of you might have guessed it, this is now possible with virtual reality. So this is me standing inside a virtual reality application called the Body VR. And this is essentially my childhood dream come true. I'm standing in a vein, I'm in one of these pots, I can blow up blood cells and shoot them down the vein. And again, this doesn't feel like you have a virtual reality device on your head. It actually feels like you're inside a vein, which is a very powerful experience. It's something that you really don't forget once you had that experience. So one of the goals that I have with this talk is, if you have the chance, try a virtual reality headset. It is really an impressive experience. Going back to the topic of e-government and virtual reality. So I believe that virtual reality will change a broad range of industries, and among that also how governments work. And one of the reasons why it's going to help politicians talk to their citizens is because it helps those citizens to understand complex data sets much easier. Let's just look at one example. This is the energy consumption of Canada from the year 1980 to 2040. And this is the traditional way of how you look at that kind of data. It's just a couple of bars, you correlate the data, and it's a very 2D, like a flat way of showing this kind of data. What you can do in virtual reality is visualize that same data, which is open source data, and then visualize it in a way that suddenly the data is not on a flat piece of paper, it's actually all around you. And you have the chance to not only see like traditional diagrams, but you're also able to select different regions, you're able to select different energy sources, for example, and this way, believe me, those of you who haven't tried it, it's a much, much more intuitive way of looking at data because it's represented in a spatial way all around you. So this will help citizens understand complex data sets better and get a better idea of where the money flows, where the energy comes from, topics that citizens should actually know about, but they don't really care because it's way too complicated to understand these data sets. And here, for example, you can see the sources of the power, you can switch to different years, you can switch to different regions, and again, you see it all in front of you, which is a much, much more intuitive way of interacting with that data. Another part where I believe that it will help the conversation between politicians and citizens is urban planning projects. So that's just one example where a lot of times politicians have a great project in mind, and we build something and we make it into a great project, but then suddenly the citizens realize that it's not really the way they thought it was going to be. It's maybe too big, or it steals the sun from their tiny little house, or something else. I mean, you probably have had that discussion a couple of times, where people are they don't really understand what's going to happen to their neighborhood or to their city. So again, this is the traditional way of doing it. This is how we're doing it right now. And I'm going to show you what it's going to look like, hopefully in 10, 20, 25 years. Again, this is a traditional 2D blueprint. You just see, well, on a flat piece of paper, what it's going to look like. But like my sister-in-law, many citizens have the problem that they cannot really imagine what the final project's going to look like. So what you can do is, you can take that city and essentially build it in virtual reality. You have a 3D model that you can interact with. You can see an overview of the whole city. So imagine it feels like there's a tiny landscape in front of you that you see. And you're looking down on this landscape and have a much better understanding of where the traffic lines go. And also, if you as an urban planning person, you wanna for example build a new housing block, then you can take a closer look at that new housing block. You can select the individual buildings, and what you can also do is you can essentially switch down to a first-person view, and that first-person view then allows you to really get a feeling of the size and also about the scope of that project. So you see in a much better way of how this will change your neighborhood. Again, You can change the setting of the sun so that you see where the sun's coming in. And then finally, you can go down to ground level and actually explore the project that might not be finished 5, 10 years in the future. So this really helps citizens understand what's going to come and also where their tax money is going to. And studies have found, then architectural studies have found that the ratio of people actually complaining about building faults, wrong walls, light switches in the wrong place goes down by 34%. So essentially, this helps to citizens to understand better what's gonna come next. And then if you take this a step further, you can actually take the citizens in and help them understand the project and also give them the chance to collaboratively work and give feedback to that. So this is an example called Design Space that was done at an architectural engineering construction hackathon, and it's now made into a product. And this allows you, as you can see, the person interacts with a model in front of him. And he also has the ability to change things about the model. So for example, he can again change the setting of the sun. He can scale up a model of an existing town like this one, then scale it up to say 1 to 200, and then start actually sketching out in ideas that they would have. And in this case, the very basic sketch rotates, but you can also pull up proper squares, and then look at it, the squares actually have proper lighting. So you can then see how a building, what kind of implications the building has on the surrounding buildings in terms of light coming in and so on and so forth. You can also put images inside, so you have some inspiration, and you can also just grab a traditional 2D blueprint and then start making it into a 3D version. So essentially with the same tool again, you can then pull out the buildings and make it more understandable because it's like a miniature town that's right in front of you. So this will help citizens understand better what kind of projects are happening in the neighborhood, where their money is going to, and it will also reduce the amount of discussions that you guys will have with the citizens because they saw it already. They can't really complain about something they saw already. So these are the major things that I wanted to transport today. Virtual reality not only has implications for a lot of industries, like the education, science, and health examples that I brought, but also for e-government and the discussion and the conversation with citizens. So this is how it will change the lives of your citizens and hopefully the government. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm now open for questions.
I'm going to try and help you do this bit, Dominic. So any questions from the floor? I have several questions for you, but I'm not allowed to ask them unless people want to come first. Who in the room would like to ask Dominic a question or even comment to what you just heard? While you're getting used to the idea of asking a question, think of it as a second question, not the first question. Psychologically, that's easier. I have a question for you, Dominic.
Shoot.
There were so many different applications there, current and potential going forward, virtual reality. Do you have a kind of a favorite, a personal favorite, or at least in terms, as defined in terms of what has the most even further potential in the future of all these different applications, the smart, the health, or wherever, data?
Well, you can imagine the city simulation that I showed. You can imagine overlaying that with any kind of data. So you can grab traffic data, for example. You can see how, for example, a new building would change the wind that's going through the town. If you're in a windy city, that often makes a difference. And you can correlate that with any type of data. So, for example, vicinity to schools, for example. So how long do my kids have to walk or drive until they get to the school? And this will help drive decisions from the citizens and also help drive urban planning to a certain degree. So that's definitely one of my favorite examples because it's a very tangible thing. I think every one of us knows the feeling of, wow, there's something being built in my hometown, but I have no idea what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
And it's like a black box that the final project is then going to come out. And that often leads to friction with citizens.
Yeah.
And you can avoid that friction by just having the ability to visualize the project that's happening in the neighborhood very, very intuitively.
But also citizens can often be, like me, ignorant about technology. So how difficult is it for people like yourselves and practitioners to actually convince citizens that virtual reality is a solution? In other words, how easy is it for them to convince them to take part in their VR experiment?
So right now, you are right. Right now, the adoption for virtual reality headsets is relatively low. So we at NVIDIA, we recently did a study that found that 70% of the general 80% of the general population and 70% of those that are interested in tech actually have never tried virtual reality. So what really has to happen is that hockey stick diagram going up until there's more people that have it in their homes, and then if you have the funds that often are there when you're doing a big project, you can then have an agency, for example, do that for you, and then distribute it for free to your citizens, or you can invite them to like an open day where they can come into the town hall, and there's a couple of VR headsets, and they can just try out and give feedback to whatever happens to them. It obviously is dependent on the size of the community. So smaller communities will have more people that actually want to give the feedback. With larger projects in larger cities, it's more of a nice gesture to the citizens saying, hey, this is what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
And then they better take it, because they can't complain after the fact that it's built, because they already saw it in front of them in full size.
Right. I have one last question for you before I ask another question. You say yes. As everybody, would you mind? I think there's a microphone somewhere. Yeah. Wait a minute. Well, okay, you've got the microphone first. Give your name, sir, and your organization, and then go ahead.
Good morning. So I'm Konstantin Scheller from the European Commission. I think there's echo. From the European Commission, working on innovation in education. So what you mentioned, of course, is quite interesting. I have some doubts about the study, but I think the potential clearly is there. So there's no debate. I think I have two questions.
Yeah.
First one is, when is it ripe? Because I think it's still a bit fidgety to use VR. By when can we expect it to be really consumer-friendly, to be really usable? Is it 3-5 years? What's a reasonable time scale to imagine when this will be something maybe 10% of the population have? And the second question, because we have here government people in the room, I think for me an interesting question is, how can we prevent in the VR world what happened with smartphones, which is that you have different walled gardens, different universes that are happening there, Apple, Microsoft, and Google, of course, having their 3 operating systems, incompatible apps, and so on. Is there something that we as policymakers can do to make sure the VR world doesn't become the same kind of administrative nightmare with dominant players that outplay everyone else?
That's session 2, actually, the regulation. But we'll let Dominic answer as well.
That's a very good question. Right now, this movement towards walled gardens has already happened. So one of the big players is Oculus. They have a device called Oculus Rift. They got bought by Facebook. Facebook is obviously interested in having that walled garden. And the other big player is HTC. They also have their own store where they obviously have digital rights management. And then there's Google, who are obviously also interested to have their own walled garden. But there are movements, to answer your question, there are movements for open source software layers for virtual reality. In essence, that means that no matter what kind of headset you're programming for, you don't have to worry about that. You're just programming for the open source software layer, and then all the headsets get automatically can automatically be used with that software layer. As policymakers, that's a very good question that is definitely worth a longer discussion. So I'm going to come to you later on. And to your first question, until the everyday Joe has a virtual reality headset, I think it's going to take 3 to 5 years. But if you're just looking at the numbers that are there right now, there's millions of headsets sold. There's hundreds of apps that you can download, and mostly for entertainment purposes. But there's also hundreds of companies that are already heavily invested in virtual reality, that are optimizing their product workflows, and they're actually already saving money. So I'm not sure how much more time I have.
Well, not much time actually. No.
Okay, this is just one example.
Right.
30 seconds.
Yeah.
Deutsche Bahn is one of the biggest players in the European ecosystem, obviously, and they are already working with virtual reality. So they have a system where they're training their employees, instead of sending all of them to one centralized training facility, they now do this decentralized. So they're saving costs, and actually the people that are learning in virtual reality perform better in those real-world tasks than people who have trained with the original equipment. So they save costs and they have better educated employees.
Okay. One last question, Daniel. Have you got a microphone, Daniel? And again, I know who you are, but nobody else does, so tell people who you are.
What do you mean nobody else? I'm Daniel Korski from the venture firm Public, and we invest in GovTech companies. It strikes me that virtual reality, for all the excitement, is an entirely new language. And like all new languages, you have to teach people that language, and you have to bring them along. And I remember from my days when I was in government working for the British Prime Minister, we were given the offer of distributing virtual sets to all secondary schools in the country. And the teachers, the Department for Education, were adamant that this would not happen. They were simply uninterested. And what they did say, and this comes to my question, they did say, look, all this technology is fantastic and interesting, and we can look at these very minor studies that indicate, as you have, there's a really important future ahead, but we don't know enough. But what we do know is that the human element in education is really important. So how do we teach people this new language, and how do we bring people along so that they don't feel this technology is being superimposed upon decades and millennia of knowledge about what good education, for example, looks like?
30 seconds, okay?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I'm keen to answer that longer, but my quick answer is, my mom's a teacher, so I know exactly what you're talking about. What I would say is, we have to take the fear of teachers being replaced. That's never going to happen. They shouldn't have the feeling that it's superimposed on them, but it's an addition to their curriculum. And to convince them, I would say, well, there was, in the early days of smartphones, nobody would want to use a smartphone in the classroom, or a laptop, or a tablet, but we should start using those technologies, because otherwise the train is just gonna overtake us.
Okay, we have to leave it there,
Yeah,
Dominic. So a big round of applause for Dominic. Fascinating. Because a lot of important people upstairs, called ministers, are using up all our IT, we have to share the handset. So while Dominic is getting rid of his and lending it to Patrick, the people in the back there, who obviously arrived far too late, there are plenty of seats in the front. If you can hear me at the back, the people who are standing, I would encourage you, almost oblige you, to come forward. There are seats, don't be shy, all of you. None of you seem to be moving. Can you hear me? If you'd rather stand, it's a free world just about, but there are plenty of seats here in the front if you'd rather sit. And we're not going to start the next session anyway until people have made their minds up. Nobody else in the back wants to sit down? No, you'd rather stand? Are you sure you'd rather? Patrick, are you geared up? Perfect, okay. So the next session is called Infrachain, Paving the Way for Blockchain Applications, and the speaker is Patrick Houch, Deputy Director of Government IT Centre of Luxembourg. Over to you, Patrick.
Yes, hello everybody. So I'm working for the IT Center of the Luxembourgish government, and actually what we are doing, we are providing IT services for all the public sector in Luxembourg, going from infrastructure services up to development, to websites, hosting, and so on. And as working for the governmental IT center, one of my roles is also to keep an eye on evolving technologies. And this is one of my favorite missions. And that's why I'm very happy to be here to talk about a private sector blockchain project called Infrachain, and which has been backed by the Luxembourgish government. So Digitalization has progressed quite fast since the early 70s. So that was when I was at university. And actually what we are doing at that stage is we were replacing non-digital systems by digital systems. Meaning we were replacing letters by faxes and faxes by emails and so on. And still today we are busy to do this. So for instance, in the energy sector, we are replacing the power meters by digital smart meters. This is still going on. But in the end, this is not really changing much of our processes, so it's optimizing, but it doesn't really bring new changes. What really brings change is when we start to interconnect those systems. So for the smart meters, we interconnect them, we create power grids, and the power grids, they have the potential to revolutionize the energy sector. So this is where it gets interesting. And what was the technology that allowed all this? That was the internet, invention of the internet. So with the TCP/IP protocol. And the question is now, what's the next technologies, or what are the next technologies that will allow us to boost our digitalization further? So so I took just those 5 examples, which are the most common. Of course, we have the Internet of Things, which we will probably talk about today more in detail. We have big data, artificial intelligence, or computer learning that comes with this. And we have something very exciting, which is 3D printing. And we have blockchain. And blockchain is one of those technologies that could actually boost our digitalization curve. So, and today I took the challenge to explain what is blockchain in order to also explain why we did the Infrachain project. So, what is a blockchain? First of all, it's not one blockchain, it's a technology. I think that many of you know about blockchain, but maybe how many of you know how it works or what's behind it? So, let's say less than 20%, so it's still worth going into this. So it's a technology. It's a quite new technology. And to put it simple, actually a blockchain is to transactions what the internet is to interconnection. That's just simply said. So blockchain could actually revolutionize the way we are doing transactions, the same way internet revolutionized the way we interconnect today. So, blockchains enable anyone, let's say on the planet, to have access to a global, trusted and decentralized database. This is simplified, but that's what it is. And here the focus lies on trust. So, in a blockchain, the trust actually is provided by cryptography, by the network of nodes, and not by a third party. And this is what's let's say, the fascinating piece of technology in the blockchain. So, to sum up, a blockchain is a new kind of database with very special feature set. And I'm going to go quickly through some of those key properties of a blockchain. Which are, first of course, a blockchain is completely decentralized. So that means that every node in the blockchain network maintains a copy of the database, which we call the ledger. And this creates very resilient systems. So for instance, the Bitcoin blockchain, so there we have about 20,000 full nodes. This is an estimation because you don't really know it's a peer-to-peer network, but this makes it very resilient. Then a blockchain is a consistent database. That means simply that everyone using it will have access to exactly the same information. And the most important part is the blockchain is consensus-based. This means that actually the network of nodes provide the trust in the blockchain, and they verify consensus each time you want to add data to the chain. You have to follow the consensus rules. If you don't follow the rules, the new block is rejected by the network. That's how it works, and that's at the heart of the blockchain. then a blockchain is immutable and append only. So the data you add to it will never be erased. So it's write once, like a write once storage, and it's propagated all over the world, and then it's just there. And it's sequential, so that everything that you add to a blockchain is added at the end of the chain. So, let's dig just a bit into this consensus mechanism. So, oh yeah, I forgot the last one. It's important because actually a blockchain is transparent because every node can have access to all the data of the chain. So they have the complete copy of the ledger. On the Bitcoin blockchain, I think that the ledger is about 40 to 50 gigabytes of data, which every node has access to. So it's completely transparent data-wise. But it's also transparent consensus-wise, so the rules that the blockchain follows are encoded in an open source code, so everyone can have access to those rules, and there are no external party, third party, who puts rules on the chain except the rules that are in the code. So how does this consensus work? First of all, transactions that are added to a blockchain, they are assembled in blocks, and each time you add a block, this block is then added to the end of the chain. Then all nodes of the chain, they have to validate actually the blocks that are added, and they verify that consensus rules are actually observed. And nodes can also propose new blocks to be added to the chain. So if a block is found valid by the complete network, that means that the consensus rule have been observed and that this block is valid, and then it's accepted by the chain and added to the data. And in this consensus mechanism, there are different ways of doing it. One of the ways is of adding an algorithm that's called proof of work. And so the proof of work is basically, it's a cryptographic puzzle that's very hard to solve, meaning that you have to invest money to solve the puzzle. So if a node proposes a new block, that means that he solved the puzzle because he has to add the result of the puzzle to the new block. And that means that he spent time solving this puzzle and that he put energy into this puzzle. So that's the trick. So that also guarantees that you cannot modify past blocks. If you want to modify past blocks in the chain, you have to solve the puzzle for all the following blocks, and this will take an enormous amount of time and also an enormous amount of energy, and that's what protects the chain. So let's have a look at this at Bitcoin, which is an example, the most known, most famous example of blockchain, let's say, use case. So that was in 2008 when Satoshi Nakamoto invented, let's say, the blockchain, and he encoded the first version of Bitcoin, which is a peer-to-peer electronic cash system that does not require any third party, any central authority. And so he was somehow at the beginning of all this blockchain evolution. So Bitcoin is a distributed ledger where actually it contains only Bitcoin transactions. It contains all the Bitcoin transactions that have ever been made since the first transaction. And actually the Bitcoin nodes, the node operators, are the guardians of the network. They have to validate the consensus mechanism and to make sure that all the nodes operate according to the rules that are encoded in the software. So underlying Bitcoin is blockchain technology with a proof of work consensus mechanism. Now, there's just a funny anecdote on Bitcoin. So there were some geeks who thought, okay, let's not add transactions to the chain. We might also add other data. And this is well possible also on Bitcoin. So they added this picture of Nelson Mandela to the blockchain, to the Bitcoin blockchain, actually. And on the slide, you can see the address of the transaction where this happened. And I think that was in 2003. So this data is now in the chain. And it's there forever until until the end of all times, or at least until the end of Bitcoin. And this points us to a possible problem, a regulatory issue, because if one would have to remove this picture, because you don't have the consent of this person for this picture to be added, you would have a big problem, because it's not possible. And I will come back to this later, because that's also a source of our project, actually, what we did. Also, it shows that you can add other information than transactions to a blockchain. You can have data, you can have links to data, but you can also have smart contracts, or you can have access to external data sources, which are called oracles. But this would go too far in detail to explain how it works, actually. So now, what are the public sector use cases of blockchain? That's a question that's very often asked, and I don't have really a good answer for it, because there aren't yet real use cases that actually are set up. There are new technologies of blockchain, so there's Ethereum, the old Ethereum Classic, there is Hyperledger and so on. There's a lot going on. There are a lot of pilot projects. There is a nice buy and selling platform called Open Bazaar and so on, but still there is no really big blockchain project that found adoption. And so for me, we are still in a time where we play with blockchain technology. We have to learn. It has to evolve. It's not really yet ready. Yet it can be used for use cases. And if we look a bit further, where can we use blockchain? So the simplest application is actually if you want to save audit trails, if you are in non-repudiation, so you want to have proof of non-repudiation, you have timestamping, which is very easy. You can do it with the Bitcoin blockchain today. You write the hash to the blockchain, and you have the proof that at that day, actually, you generated this hash, and that you had the document that goes with the hash. You can implement token systems, which are typically currencies, cryptocurrencies, or alike. But going further, more generally, blockchains are a good way if you have many partners who are not related and that need to collaborate on common data without any central authority. This works good for tracking assets, for tracking goods, from the facilities to the shelves and so on. And then if you think further, blockchain and especially smart contracts can help the citizen, for instance, to have better control on the data that the governments have on them. Citizens might also be able to give access to their data without actually providing the data. So a smart contract can do operations on the data without giving the data to a third party, for instance. And if you look still further, we are in the e-voting platforms, and I think we can use blockchain technology to make those platforms even safer, because it's a big topic, and there's a lot of research also going on in this domain. So, now, what happened in Luxembourg, and where did our project start? Actually, we have some Luxembourgish companies who are into blockchain, some startups, and they quickly found out that in the public blockchains, we lack some very elementary features that are necessary to build a good business case on it. So the first problem we have, or they had, is that we don't have accountability of nodes. So all the nodes that are operating the blockchain, they are not accountable for what they do. You do not even know them. You do not know in the public blockchain who operates the nodes and where on the planet these nodes are. And this leads to the second problem. So you have not a sustainable operational environment because no one gives you an SLA. If you want to put a business case on the blockchain, on a public blockchain, you don't have an SLA, you don't have a contact. That's why most of the projects are run on private blockchains. So we have regulatory compliance issues, like said before. You cannot erase data, but also you do not know where your data is or who stores your data. You even don't know on what geographical region your data is stored. We have no guarantee that there is an active monitoring done on the chain. It's a community. You have no guarantee that incidents on the chain are properly handled. If the chain doesn't work like it should, well, hopefully it will auto-regulate. And then if you look at this pie chart, this represents the hash power distribution of the Bitcoin blockchain. And there you see that if the 5 biggest contributors actually team up on this public blockchain, they can control the chain. And so this a bit destroys the real decentralization of trust. So it isn't a true decentralization of trust because very few people have control of the chain anywhere. So those are the problems that these companies found with public blockchains. But on the other hand, if we go for a private chain, it doesn't work neither, because actually on the public blockchain, well, it isn't driven by a community anymore, and the heart of the blockchain completely disappears. So you don't have this notion of distributed trust anymore. You have a third party who operates your chain. Well, so it's not, let's say, the advantage and the beauty of the blockchain is somehow lost. Also, this doesn't give you the same level of resiliency that you have on a public chain because of a limited number of nodes, for instance. And then finally, you often find you can do it as a POC, have a pilot project, but if you really look into it, you will quickly find that you can easily do it with non-blockchain components because just simply you don't, let's say, you don't profit from this community governance or distributed trust. So anyhow, you have a third party in place that operates this. So you can do as well without blockchain, with decentralized database, for instance. So how do we bridge this gap now? So we the idea is to create Infrachain and to build a framework that is managed by a community and that is actually building different kind or supporting different kind of blockchains. So we need to have this community-based governance of a blockchain environment. We need to have a sustainable environment, so we need to provide SLAs to the application providers. We need to have accountable node operators, so we need to identify them and certify who operates the nodes. We need to know where the nodes are. We need to achieve regulatory compliance, and we want to set high security standards on the node operators, because there's also a cybersecurity risk if everyone wants the same code all around the planet. This could actually be a major issue cybersecurity-wise. And the infrastructure we are setting up shall be technology agnostic, so we don't talk about Ethereum or Bitcoin or Hyperledger, we just talk about a blockchain infrastructure where different blockchains can run. So, and what we did actually, let's say, some visionary companies in Luxembourg teamed up and they created a non-profit organization. And the government of Luxembourg is also a founding member of this organization. And our goal is so to set up this infrastructure with this community governance. The community is the non-profit organization, and we actually are setting up a framework for a certification framework where external certification authorities can certify node operators. The node operators, they sign up SLAs with Infrachain that they will run the nodes in a proper way. And Infrachain then will provide SLAs to the application providers. What's important is that it's technology agnostic. So an application provider can have a blockchain instance for himself, and he can, for instance, decide, I want a blockchain that runs only on nodes in Europe. Or he can say, I want an Ethereum blockchain with this Genesis file, and I want this blockchain only to run on governmental nodes. That could be interesting to have a governmental blockchain for eGov applications, for instance. So that's the idea behind it. Those are the founding members of Infrachain. So they are of all sectors. It's fintech, it's consulting, they are legal, it's the government, there's PKI, there's university, and so on. And we are still accepting founding memberships until the 18th of November. So we have a list of additional members. So the number of members will double before end of November. And there will be some big names featured on the list. So if there's any interest, so we're still in discussion to have founding members. But from the 18th of November on, we will accept also, of course, memberships. Those won't be founding members, but executive or standard memberships. And so I'm over time. A bit. I knew it. Well, sorry for that. Next steps, we have set up a blockchain test bed. It's based on Ethereum, and it runs on at 5 host operators today, one of those being the government of Luxembourg. And we have created action groups to continue working on the framework, especially on the governance, how are decisions taken, and so on. We are working on the SLAs. There are 3 kinds of SLAs, and we have also created a special action group to work on GDPR compliance issues, to make sure that we don't build something that's a showstopper for someone who needs to be GDPR compliant. And so what do we need now? We need your help. It's a community project, so we need to build up a community. So we need members that drive this community and that help to build it. On the other hand, we need node operators. That doesn't necessarily need to be the same people, the same entities. So node operators, they sign the SLA, they operate the nodes and they get paid for it. And we need the application providers. So some of the members are application providers, but we want more. We want to see a use case, and we want to help you and build the blockchain that you need on our infrastructure. So that was it. I was very quick, but I knew it was challenging. To do it in 20 minutes was not possible. Sorry for that. So, thank you.
We haven't got much time, so unless there's a burning question from the audience, I'm going to ask the only question, Patrick. Oh, there's a question from the audience. James, you get to ask the only question, and then you can ask other questions to Patrick over coffee. Name, organization, my friend.
James Lovegrove, Red Hat. Red Hat is a leading open source solutions provider in the world. I'm going to just riff off what Dominic said in the previous session, the extent to which open source plays a very key role to address this challenge of walled gardens. So I guess the question to you around this very exciting initiative in Luxembourg around Infrachain, the extent to which open source also plays that key role to ensure that it doesn't get forked and that it remains open, so it doesn't compromise that potential to reap these benefits for citizens, but also the extent to which you're working with other member states to avoid perhaps a political walled garden, the extent to which this technology might well work, but if the cooperation and the community sense between governments isn't working, then we don't reap the rewards at a pan-European level. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, so I think the community aspect of the project is very important, and it's not a governmental project, it's a private sector project. So there's only one government in it today, which is Luxembourg, and I expect that even if all the governments would join, there will be much more private sector entities in the community than governments. And so what we are setting up is also the management framework, and this will somehow guarantee that not a few stakeholders can actually take up decisions. So it will be a community project, and there will be rules how you can join and how this is internally, let's say, managed. And yes, open source is important, not only for the code. I agree 100%. The blockchain, it doesn't work if it's not open source, because you actually cannot see how it works. But it's also important in terms of our organization. So all the documents, the certification schema that we have set up, it's very like ISO 27000 and so on. So it's aligned a bit to how this works with the different organizations who can certify. So this will be open source. It will be public document. Also, the documents that explain how the management of the association works is open source, or is public viewable. So it has to be totally transparent, because the goal is to have trust in those chains that are run through Infrachain.
Okay, and for my education, Patrick, SLAs, what does SLA stand for?
Service level agreement. So
service level
contracts,
agreement, thank you.
Contracts, yeah.
All right, a big hand of applause to Patrick, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see the next speaker is already mic'd up. Perfect. So Yanni, please join me on the stage. So our final presentation this morning is called X-Road and Other Possibilities on Cross-Border Collaboration on Common IT Solutions. Yanni Ruskanen, who's the coordinating project manager of the Population Register Center of Finland. Yanni.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope this works. Do I get the sound as well? Yeah, thank you. So I'm Jani, and I'm here because I want to share some information on current possibilities that we are building up these cross-border services between Finland and Estonia. Myself, I'm leading the development of Suomi.fi services, which essentially create a digital platform that the whole public sector in Finland is using. So they are common IT solutions that are both mandatory to use by the public sector and in many parts free to use for private sector as well. But I am going to concentrate today on two things, two of those services, and I'm trying to keep this short because we are running out of time. First of all, on data exchange layer, you might know that we are in Estonia. It's based on the X-Road technology. Estonia gave that to Finland, and we are grateful. Now we want to return something back, so I'm going to talk about the Finnish service catalog as well, which we've already done. So first of all, we have solutions that make it possible to exchange data between organizations, also between organizations in different countries. The service catalog makes it possible to exchange service information, meaning the information that is meant for the citizens about the public services. First of all, few words on, it's called Suomi.fi data exchange layer. You might know it as an X-Road or XT as well. First of all, it's a standardized way to exchange data between organizations and countries. We are doing it jointly together between Finland and Estonia. So the technology itself is being now developed jointly. This is, I think, one of the first things where two countries are working together on a common solution. This is organized by a new government body called the Nordic Institute for Interoperability Solutions, or shortly NIS. So whenever in the future you see NIS, you remember Finland and Estonia working together, all right? There is the S in the end of the word solutions. Now, it focuses on the X-Road technology. It might be something else in the future as well. And there's the word Nordic. We are wishing to have other countries to join in, not just the Nordic countries, but there is the Nordic aspect as well. The institute is funded by both governments, so this is joint project, so funding comes from both countries as well. What we've done, as I said, I'm coming from the Population Register Center, where this X-Road development is one of these services we've been doing. Now we are in the phase where we've done the technological federation between countries. So we have development, test, and production environment, which in fact make it possible to exchange data across the border, to automate processes. Here are few of those first use cases that we think we are going to use this federation for. These are not in production. They are something that are being planned. In Finland, the organizations can already use the test environment to incorporate their old services and try to see how to exchange this data. I'm calling this the circle of life because, well, you know, birth, deaths, changes of address, and obviously taxation is over there. This is regarding all of us. So Circle of Life is the first cross-border service concept we are focusing on, I hope. Then a few words on this quite unique solution that we built in Population Register Center. It's called the Suomi.fi Finnish Service Catalog. And what it is, it's a new base register, emphasizing the word base register, that contains standardized metadata of all public services. Although there's the word public services, it's free to use for private sector as well. It's one of those solutions that anyone in Finland can use. So anyone can describe their services into this new base register. This is based on a recommendation by Commission. It's called CPSV, Common Public Service Vocabulary. And this is, as I said, in full production. So if there are other solutions in other countries that are using the same recommended data model, we can now federate with that as well. Here's a short concept of the information that is in this service catalog. It contains the organizational register, meaning information about all public sector bodies. It contains information about all those services that the public sector is producing. And they are in the coherent, structured way the way the services are being described. And it includes information about all those channels that this service is available, meaning electronic services, web pages, phone channels, etc. We are adding on new channels as we go. There are a few quite unique features. First of all, this solution provides manual updating of the information, but we have an open API in and out. So some of the government bodies in Finland are producing information from existing systems. So we are already federating this information between organizations. The second is that we are using ontology services to describe these public services. We are using this service called by the National Library of Finland. So ontologies, vocabularies to describe them semantically. And we have even incorporated an automatic annotation which analyzes the text and helps the updater to produce the right keywords, or right ontology words. Obviously, all the data in the base register is open data. It's licensed under the Creative Commons 0, so it can be used commercially as well. There are some applications, mobile applications already in Finland that are using this data, so it's free to use. It's mandatory to use by all public sector organizations. There are more than 100,000 service and service channel descriptions already in the database. So it's a huge amount of information about the public sector services. We have had the legislation to use these Suomi.fi services for a year now. It means all our services that we're developing. This is searchable by citizens through our national portal. It's called Suomi.fi as well, where the end users can find all the information about the public services. Here are a few pictures from the portal. I took them from the English site, where I am looking for the information, and these are the ontology words which we are using to describe the information. Here's an example of the service, and on the tab you can find the service channels as well. So meaning, how do I get this service from a public body? Which kind of channels I have to use? We have even incorporated the information about the physical locations, and we can now provide routing. So we can say, I'll give you an example of digitalization. We can compare the services. We can tell the user that it's a very far way to get to the nearest public physical location where you can do this service. But here are the digital services. Could you please try these yourself? So we can actually try to encourage users to use the digital form of the service instead of actually traveling to some physical location. Then few words on other possibilities, and I just want to bring these up because these are part of those common solutions that we've already built, and these are going to play a big role, obviously, when we are thinking about the cross-border services. There's the Suomi.fi eID service, which is a national eID service already in production, and it provides single sign-on to all Finnish public service digital services. And we are now in the phase that we are soon ready for the eIDAS Federation. This should be in test environment by the end of this year. And it means that we're ready for giving other European Union citizens the access to the Finnish services if that country is part of the eIDAS Federation already. There are a lot of other features in this Finnish eID service as well. Like we're checking the real-time personality from the population register center when the users are signing in, so we're not trusting in the eID method. And we can also then prevent the use of, let's say, bank codes if the person is dead, because obviously we are checking the person is live. Then another interesting thing that I want to emphasize on is something unique that we've developed, is a thing called e-authorization service. And what it means, it's a common solution on how to authorize a person or a company to company or person to person to use some electronic service. And under that, there is a authorizations register where users can actually create or request digital authorizations. So this is a common solution that can be used with any electronic service in Finland. Actually, it's in use in a lot of services already. And the use cases could be like parents need to give access to their children to represent themselves when they're getting older, or even when I want to represent my better half, so to speak. Or the service also checks the authorities from the basic registers, so we can now provide the access for children's information and services in digital form. The third one is called Suomi.fi Messages, which is essentially a digital post that is going to be open very soon, and it's for the citizens first, and next year it's going to be for the entrepreneurs as well. And this is a field that probably is interesting when we start thinking about government organizations communicating across borders, sending digital post to to other countries' residents. And the best part, I saved it for last if this works, all our solutions are open source, which means that any countries, member states, whatever you're representing, you should go and check. Because what we've created, we're giving away for free. They are there. Obviously, we wish you join us for a joint development through the Institute, if we are talking about the X-Road technology, but otherwise go and check. Especially, I'm interested in knowing if there are member states or organizations that would be interested in of the Finnish service catalog, because we're looking for the partners to start exchanging the service information as well. After the coffee break, you're going to hear about the single digital gateway as well. So as a Finnish part, I think these components and ways to produce the information and the flow of data are the things we want to embrace the Commission as well to maybe use, or at least take account when building up this larger thing. And in the last slide, you will find information. The material contains links, and there are a few videos on YouTube as well. I didn't want to play them. I'm not sure for that technology, if it works. But go there and check yourselves. They're in English as well. What is the portal? What's the service catalog? There's even some things about the authorizations as well. And I still have 4 minutes left, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Jenny. I'm sure none of you have ever been to a conference where the coffee break started on time. So we're not going to break that long established tradition. So we have a couple of minutes for questions, Jenny. And I just asked my boss over here that all the presentations today will be made available, I'm told, on the conference website, presidency website, which is good news. So don't worry about taking too many notes. Any questions from the audience? I, as always, have lots of questions. While you're thinking about a question for Yanni, my question, Yanni, is clearly this is a work in progress, and it's a obviously very exciting work in progress. And that's all the underlying theme of the whole conference today is potential collaboration between member states in Europe and all the obstacles to collaboration. To what extent is it a legitimate reason or just a convenient excuse when you hear some member states say, well, it's easy for Finland, say, and Estonia to get together, they're relatively small populations, 5.5 million, 1.4 million. You can't expect countries with larger populations to enter into these collaborations. Do you have any sympathy for that kind of argument? That it's easier for collaboration between small countries to take place?
I would say, yeah, you might have a point on that Finland and Estonia have similar kind of sort of development cycle. We've been growing together. So it's easier to start collaborating, I know that. But when we think about these new solutions, for example, I'm using the example of service catalog, that's something that we need to start thinking, how to provide constant, how would I say that, structured information that is similar in every member state. So it's a new approach, new solution. So I don't think there's an excuse saying that we are doing this differently. You could start using the same way, and besides there are the recommendation by Commission as well for the data model to be used anyway. Yeah. So why not start using the solutions we've already built? They're free. That should be interesting for other countries as well.
Yeah, good answer, Jenny. Any more questions from the audience before we break for coffee? If not, we break for coffee. Back in the room at 10:45, no later. Thank you very much. Now we're going to hear about the policy framework for borderless government. And as this morning we have 3 speakers, Robert Krimmer, Hubert Gams, and Edmunds Belskis. It's my very great pleasure to introduce the first speaker. Robert Krimmer is the professor at Tallinn University of Technology, the Ragnar Nõrska School of Innovation and Governance. His talk is going to be about TOOP preliminary outcomes. My first question to him would be why the once only principal project is not called OOPP, but is called TOOP, but then you'll explain that in your presentation, Robert. You have the floor.
Thanks a lot for the kind introduction, and thanks for everyone for joining. And it always takes a bit of time, but I will try to do my best in catching your interest. So basically, to answer your first question, why TOOP and not OOPS or SOUP or any of the other acronyms? Actually, we thought, in the end, it's something that is Estonian. I mean, it basically means beer mug in Estonian. And that was, you can already guess how we created the name and when we created it. Obviously, we were drinking beer at that time, and we thought it was the right way to go. So, jokes aside, what is TOOP? TOOP is actually something very similar to what you heard just in the previous presentation. It is about cross-border data exchange. It actually is a project that we would think is not necessary at all when we talk about cross-border economic transactions, right? We would think that actually today you could come and register a branch of a company or a daughter company of another country's mother company, just like that. You can just transfer the documents electronically from one country to the other, or you can just at least take the PDF and you say, you know, that's actually the right document, you can take it. Unfortunately, that's not the case. European countries don't trust each other that much yet in the electronic world. In the paper world, we have found some ways on how we can trust each other. We get a paper printout, we get it certified by a notary, we get an apostille, which is an international law agreement. So we have a lot of bureaucratic steps that we have to take. We have to get the documents translated, et cetera, in order to build the trust. So what essentially TOOP will do is to help create a single market, or as Andrus Ansip said at one point, we actually have to develop this single market where we can actually have public services that meet our today's needs, which are digital, which are open and cross-border by design, so that we're actually not operating in 20 different markets, but we're actually operating in one single market that is also available in the digital world. So that's essentially the task that we've been given. And that is a consortium of 21 beneficiaries, or we can say 50 organizations scattered all around Europe in 21 different countries that try to build a data exchange layer on how we can get documents from one side to the other so that we can actually collect and store data only once. So only once means that we employ the principles of relational databases also for exchanging data. So rather than taking copies, rather than making second instances of the same kind of information, we start linking, or at least in the first instance, we get it from the original source where the data comes from. So we want to have, by that, automatic data sharing. We want to have non-redundant data so that we actually have reliable data and we can trust it. Just think of that. When have you shared your home address with one agency in your country, and then you went to another agency that has still, that already has your new address? So you have maybe different residences. You have sometimes even different names if your name is hard to spell and somebody makes a spelling mistake when entering the data. So essentially, we try to bring reason to data exchange across border. So what do we have at the end? We want to have time savings, not only for public administration and businesses, not only do we want to lower administrative burdens and costs, not only do we want to improve the service quality and the efficiency in general, but we also want to actually say that we're going to do that in a responsible way, in an ethical way, so that we adhere to data protection principles, and that we actually also have a secure way of doing this. So we're employing and we're building upon interoperability standards as we need that. So in the end, it will be an essential element of the digital single market that ideally you will not see at all, and you will not even feel that it actually exists. So essentially we get rid of our own work because machines will do it, right? So what are we talking about? So you've heard about X-Road, you have heard about data exchange layers in your home country, you might be responsible for them. Essentially what we're doing is we have an application in country B, right, where you want to do something, like, for example, registering a branch, and we'll get back to that. And for that, you need to get data from country A, where you need to provide information about that company, right? So you have one side on the top, the data consumption, and you have the data provider, the base register, the population register, the company register at the bottom. And the problem is now, how do we get the two talking to each other? Right? So on the one hand side, there might be a data exchange layer in country A, right, that will provide the information like the X-Road or other exchange layers that you might have. And then you have in country B, which consumes the data, also an exchange layer. But somehow, how do you get them talking to each other? And that essentially will be the federated architecture that TOOP will be building, right? So rather than having talking, we're not only going to talk between country A and country B, but we talk with all 28 member states, right? So in the end, that will be the centerpiece of the data exchange across the European member states at one point. So how do we get there? We want to explore and to demonstrate that the once-only principle can work cross-border, right? And not only in a bilateral sense, but also in a multilateral sense. And we explore that in 3 different pilots. We have for that 2 more years to go. So on the one hand side, we look at the area of cross-border procurement, of cross-border business mobility, as I explained you just before, and on cross-border service provision. In a second pilot, we want to talk about monitoring cross-border companies, right? So when you take part in such a procurement, you very often, as the tenderer, have to monitor that the companies do not change ownership, that there is not a change of directors, et cetera, and we basically provide a news alert for you at one point, that whenever there is a change in this cross-border companies, you will get an information, oops, there has something, new owner, new managing director, et cetera. So that's our second pilot case. And then we have a third pilot case that is actually a quite different area, and actually one that you, in Estonia, and if you're in Finland or generally living in the Baltic Sea area, you experience that very often, but you don't see it. That is, whenever a ship enters a harbor, quite a number of documents have to be exchanged. And in one case, there is a document about the ship itself, so who is the owner, how much capacity, how many passengers you can have. And then you also have information about the crew. So who is serving on the board, if they're fit to serve, et cetera, and where they come from. And those are actually documents that have to be filled out every single time when the ship enters the harbor on paper. Right? Our idea is now that this actually will be done online, and not only will the data be copied onto these forms, but they will actually be dynamically pulled from the relevant registers, which, as you can imagine, in case of crews, might be a bit of a problem because the crew can be from anywhere in the world, right? So at least to some extent, we want to have that optimized. We want to find out what are the barriers and what are the problems in this. So how will that process that we are envisaging or that we are piloting in these elements actually look like, or what will happen in the back end? So we have imagined the case of Leon, who is an ice cream seller from Italy, that actually wants to open a branch here in Estonia because he thinks that in Estonian summer people are really craving for Italian ice cream, which it is actually very true. So what he will do is that he will actually visit the Estonian company register, right? And he will say, I want to open a branch. Rather than now starting to fill in all the documents that are needed, for example, like the extract from the company register from Italy, like having that certified by a notary or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Italy and getting the apostille on there, then getting it to a translator here in Estonia that is a sworn translator that translates it from Italian into Estonian. Actually, he will just say, let's pull that information from the Italian register. So what he will do is that the Estonian company register will send a request to the Italian using the TOOP federated architecture. It actually will then confirm the existence of that company in Italy. It actually will confirm the existence of the mandate for Leon that he's able to represent his company. And the Italian portal will confirm this and send the information back to the Estonian company register. The Estonian company register will process all the information, will actually see whether or not everything is satisfied, done automatically, of course, and eventually we'll send the information back to Leon that everything is in order and your company registration in Estonia is totally fine, and you now have basically a branch of the Italian company in Estonia. This process I'm helping a friend actually to do at this point in time. We started with this in early July, and we're just about to submit the documents to the necessary Estonian authorities, right? So you see, it is actually something that hopefully, at one point, and that's our aim, will be done in minutes, maybe after verification in days, but not months anymore. So essentially, in order to get there, we actually have to overcome quite a number of barriers. On the one hand side, we have legal, where we have to make sure that the lawfulness and the compliance are done or handled correctly, that we actually have the legal value and the validity of the data. So only because we can exchange it electronically, it doesn't mean that country B actually trusts the data and actually says nobody has hacked in between, Brussels hasn't exchanged the data in between in this federated architecture, and actually you also do not violate any data protection issues. Just think of the case of the ship, of the crew certificates. I said before that the crew has to be fit for service, right? This health status is actually very sensitive data. If more information than just is fit for service or is not fit for service will be transmitted. So we also have to adhere data protection issues there. You will hear a little bit of possible solutions on the legal side in a bit from Hubert, but on the technical side we also have other issues. We have issues with legacy systems, right? So we have old systems that might not be able to talk to our infrastructure, so we need to build gateways or other elements on how we can get them talking to each other. And of course also other simple things as technical and semantic interoperability will be an issue, because it doesn't mean that necessarily a company owner will mean the same thing in the both countries. It's more or less standardized and aligned, but not everywhere. So on the organizational level, we also have a huge issue, of course, governance, right? So it might be easy to say that all European countries will use this federated architecture, but then again, all the organizations that are linked up to that, they also need to have some kind of a governance structure, some kind of a model on how you regulate this relationship between the organization and the federated architecture, not least what will happen with on the other side, right? So that everyone that is in this trust network actually believes and exchanges the data with each other. What we also see that once only, although it is very high in the European agenda these days, right, it still plays a minor role in some of the member states in the European Union on a national level, right? It's only starting to be recognized. What can it actually mean? What can it actually mean that you only have one source of information within the country? You don't have to register the residence of a citizen everywhere in every different organization. Just think about the changes that it means for you as a civil servant, that you have built over 20, maybe 25, 30 years, this form that is actually the expression of your work, of your administrative process that you're actually governing. And now suddenly you have to give up control over the data. You have to trust the data that comes from your colleague that you always hated, but now works in the population register, right? And you have to trust his work, and you know that this doesn't work. So actually there are quite some issues that we have to solve. And of course, some of them actually have to deal with money. Right? Sometimes some organizations are just getting their own budget by selling the data that they own. Right? Think about maps or other different areas where there is actually quite a bit of money in there. And so suddenly this whole thing should be just exchanged for free. Maybe not, right? Maybe we'll be able to actually settle fees within the network, but that's also something that we need to work on. And of course, we see already quite a lot of pressure from certain interest groups, right? That have actually very legitimate interests, that are already exchanging data, that are already aggregators of certain data of some sort, that actually say like, what are you doing there? Are you building parallel structures? We say, no, we're just connecting and we're just helping that actually data exchange will happen. Oh, we don't need that, we're already doing that, right? So we already see that happening. There is quite some pressure to overcome, both on the national but also on the European level. So it's not going to be something that we'll do with one click, right? It's actually going to be quite a challenging project, but we are actually well underway. So what in the end will we enable, or what is our goal or our vision that we want to speak? We want to enable user-centric or use-centric public services. We want to deliver cost savings for business and public administrations. I mean, they are in the once only study that DG Connected earlier, they're talking about 5 billion euros of potential savings per year, right? So that's not a small number. Still, there might be even more in there if you also consider all the time savings that we could do with the business and public administrations. I just told you about 3 months where you could actually already be operating here in Estonia. That it just takes. It's not the fault of Estonia or anything else. It's just about processes that take a lot of time, just even if it's only shipping information from country A to country B, which even with express mail sometimes takes a week. With this, I'm looking forward to your questions, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. I have the first question.
Please.
Your last slide, actually, the benefits. I mean, it's a no-brainer. Clearly, it seems to me why this is not more supported. We're here, of course, today, the conference, it's for the witnessing the signature of the eGovernment declaration, and it's all about encouraging member states to do more together, highlighting the potential, and indirectly highlighting the lack of cooperation, maybe historically. So, in your judgment, for these benefits to become even more self-evident, what kind of things need to be done? Otherwise, we'll have the same problem this time next year. What needs to be done?
I mean, I think we first need to show that it's actually technically possible, right? I mean, that's our main thing, to say, okay, here is something, this is how it will work, and then what we mainly need, we need to make sure that the legislation that will support this kind of data exchange will pass, right? And then we need to find the governance models that will allow us actually that we trust each other.
Yeah.
And that's basically a social process that we can only do by going along, right?
Yeah. Well, you see, it's interesting. This issue of trust comes back through every presentation we've heard so far until today. Any more questions from the room? Anybody would like to ask Robert a question or make a comment? You're very welcome. Yes, sir, you, sir. There's a microphone on its way. And those people standing at the back, as I said this morning, if you'd like to sit down, there are plenty of available chairs. Do feel free. You, sir. I'll give your name and organization, please.
My name is Gautam Hazari from GSM Association, which is a trade organization for all mobile operators around the world. So I was just having an observation on, the previous presentation here as well, where there was a discussion about data exchange between Estonia and Finland. And here you have a great presentation about data exchange for company information, etc. Then we have eIDAS as well, where there's a data exchange happening on identity and also trust services like signature. Okay. So will it not make sense to look for some synergies across all? Otherwise, there will be a fragmentation, and there will be additional cost in creating, infrastructure. And from the user's perspective, it will be, a bit of experience problem as well. Because as a user, I don't just need to, let's say, identify myself. I will have to have my health data exchange. I'll have to have my, tax information exchange. So if there is a synergy, there will be cost saving. There will be simplification, and also they will be easier for the user.
So I couldn't agree more with you, and I need to apologize. I didn't make clearly that what we are building here is building up on exactly eIDAS, on the building blocks that are available through the European e-government framework. So the core element of exchanging the data, or where we want to employ the subsidiarity principle, that we actually employ different exchange layers in different countries, and we're basically connecting them. So for us, it doesn't matter if there is an exchange layer in Estonia, if that is Axroad or is something else, but we're connecting them between the countries, right? If there is already an exchange bilaterally between two countries, that's fine for us as well. That's not a problem because it's happening in the back office, and we will build upon that. So eIDAS, yes, important element for identification, authentication for our network. E-delivery, that is part of eIDAS, is actually our core component for the data exchange level, right? And we will be connecting the national infrastructures so that we actually avoid this fragmentation and build a consistent user experience towards the citizen. But in our case, that might be also important. We're building on companies first, because we believe that the data protection issues are much lower in that area first, and then we'll go towards the citizen level, which is actually one where I'm personally very interested in. When you live in Tallinn, you quite frequently travel actually to Finland or to your neighboring countries, where you might also consume public services, like, for example, going to a doctor, right? And of course, you would want to have that information is available also in your home country for your home insurance, etc. And so that is certainly something that in the future will be a no-brainer because it will be possible. And we are building small parts of that to get to that future.
Thank you. Any more questions? If not, no? No more questions? Okay, in that case, a big round of applause for Robert.
Just wanted to invite everyone to visit our stand also, where we can learn more about the business perspective on TOOP and also the citizen perspective from our sister project Scope 4C.
Okay, thank you for the advertising. Right, now, our next speaker, Hubert Gams, who's the Director of Modernization of the Single Market at the European Commission in Brussels, and his presentation is called The Single Digital Gateway. Over to you, Hubert.
Thank you very much, Paul. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm very happy to be here. I have only 4 slides, including this one, and I will not very diligently follow them, but they will just visually put in front of you some of the elements that I mentioned. Robert already just talked about the single market and the importance of the TOOP project for building it. And Yanni in the first session expressed his curiosity about the single digital gateway. I will try to at least partially satisfy his curiosity because the single digital gateway is actually very much a cooperation project between member states and the Commission. A 2016 survey of Business Europe showed that 86% of businesses think that administrative complexity is the most important obstacle in the single market today. And not knowing the rules is a problem for 2/3 of the SMEs interested in exporting to other EU countries, and for 60% of startups. Over 90% of consumers and businesses are unaware of any online services at European level that they could contact if they are facing a problem. So I guess it's a fair summary to say that it is especially difficult for EU citizens and businesses to understand and to navigate the administrative complexities of member states that are not their own. They find it challenging, cumbersome and costly to make sense of rules that apply in other member states, to figure out how to comply with these rules, to deliver all the paperwork required in another language, and even to have to visit sometimes in person the public offices in the country concerned. Now, we cannot get rid of administrative complexity altogether, but we can and we have to try to make it at least easier to handle. And e-government can greatly facilitate the functioning of the single market, provided that it is not designed only for national users, but also takes account of cross-border users. And this is what we unfortunately still see quite often. Online procedures are designed for national users and are not accessible for cross-border users because they require national identification numbers that are only available for nationals, residents, or companies already established in the country concerned. They are fully integrated with national base registers, based on the once-only principle mentioned by Robert, but actually do not allow cross-border users to deliver supporting documents or data originating from authorities in other member states. They give error messages if you try to fill in a non-national mobile number or address in another member state. Or in extreme cases, require fees which can only be paid through the national payment systems. And a recent study has found that businesses would save 170 million euros annually if the most important procedures they use were available fully online, also for cross-border users. In addition, if high quality and accessible information was available online, businesses could save up to 55 billion annually. So I think there is a clear business case for addressing these problems, and it's exactly therefore that the Commission has proposed in May of this year to establish a single digital gateway. This single digital gateway aims to change the way users experience the single market. It will make it easier for everyone interested in living, working, or doing business in another EU country to find the information about the rules and procedures applicable. And it must guide and will guide users to assistance services and help them to access the national procedures they need. There will be one user-friendly interface in a language users can understand. Now, it is very important. The gateway will very much build on the existing national portals and services. It's not about doing everything starting from new. There is a lot of information out there. So including the ongoing e-government efforts in many countries. But we hope very much that it will create a push to improve and streamline them where needed, and that it will improve the findability of all these services through a search tool available at EU level. Moving to or starting to do business in another EU country should not be a leap in the dark anymore. People should be able to find out in advance which rules they have to apply and they need to comply with and how they can do this. This very much, we hope, will open new professional and personal horizons across all EU member states and therefore increase citizens' and businesses' ownership of Europe and the single market as a source of opportunities. So the gateway should be designed very much with the user as its core. It will operate across administrative and sectorial silos and improve the findability, the quality, and the availability of the services provided. For that, we need common minimum quality criteria that will have to apply for these services that are part of the gateway. And this will also help to create the level playing field between citizens and businesses in different member states. The most important procedures should be digitalized in all member states. And in addition, to help the user, exchanging supporting documents among competent authorities has to be made much easier. And this will mean that citizens and businesses will not have to submit the same paperwork several times. For this purpose, the gateway aims to create a legal basis for rolling out the once-only principle that has been explained very eloquently by Robert, for the procedures that involve cross-border users, once a workable technical solution has been developed. And very much, of course, that's why we need these projects that are ongoing, because we need a technical solution for this, and it has to be workable. And then we also hope, and this is an important aspect of the Single Digital Gateway, that we will continuously update and improve it. And for that, we need user feedback. So one element will be that users will always be invited to report any administrative obstacles they encounter when living, working, or doing business in another EU country. Now, the Single Digital Gateway proposal, the Commission has put it forward in May. Now we're discussing it with the Member States in the Council, with the European Parliament. So it's not yet adopted. We very much hope that it would be adopted in 2018. After that, the design of the necessary tools will have to be complemented in close coordination with the stakeholders, and the gateway will go through a test period. So we hope, the plan is to launch the gateway in 2020. If everything goes according to plan, which we all know in reality doesn't happen all the time, or rather rarely. As I said, this is a common project between the Member States and the Commission. Therefore, we will need some coordination, some institutionalized group to ensure smooth cooperation and to ensure that to work out the many technical details in close cooperation with all the Member States. The proposal builds on the many e-government tools that either exist already or are in the pipeline. Many building blocks are already there. The examples that I can mention are the eIDAS regulation that Jani already mentioned also, and the once-only project. And in particular, the Single Digital Gateway requires a functioning and easy cross-border, that's the emphasis I want to put there, identification mechanism. And for this aspect, we depend very much also on the successful implementation of the eIDAS regulation. The use of existing building blocks and the fact that the Commission will provide funds for the translation of the national information, for instance, will hopefully keep the costs of the gateway in check. And we also have to keep in mind that the European structural and investment funds provide very significant contributions to the development of e-government solutions at national level. So the member states are not left alone, and there is actually funding available. For the member states, there are 3 obligations that they have to cope with. Most of the member states already have systems in place to fulfill these, but some further work will be necessary, and in some cases. First, the member states will have to provide information on topics relevant for citizens and businesses that want to make use of the single market. These topics are currently covered by the Euro portal, and they will also have to provide links to their online procedures and assistance services in a common repository that will be managed by the Commission. Second, the member states will have to apply minimum quality criteria to all the content and services linked to the single digital gateway. For example, information doesn't help if it's not correct and if it's not updated regularly. Thirdly, member states will have to move online if they have not yet done so. We have identified 13 key procedures that are of particular interest for businesses or citizens. And member states will have to make sure that already available online procedures do not discriminate against users from other member states. So in conclusion, the objective of Single Digital Gateway is to improve the functioning of the internal market, of the single market. Our objective is that it will significantly improve the user experience and therefore improve the confidence of citizens and of businesses in the single market. Online procedures and the provision of accurate and reliable information, easier access to assistance services will all help to smooth cross-border exchanges, generate efficiencies, and reduce administrative burden, and therefore contributing to the creation of new job opportunities and growth. The Gateway is an ambitious project, especially because it is designed as a fully cross-silo approach that puts the users first. And as we all know, in our respective administrations, working across silos is never easy. But it is the only way to avoid offloading the administrative complexity on the shoulders of citizens and businesses. And the Gateway is not a centralized solution, and its success therefore will depend very much on the close cooperation between the Commission and the Member States. And the only way to make this work is by working together with a strong common commitment to deliver an excellent EU-wide system of online public services. And I know that I will be able to count on you. Thank you.
Thank you, Hubert. I have a question for you. Surprise, surprise. A common theme coming out all the presentations this morning from you, from Robert now, and also in the morning sessions, Dominic and Robert, for example, is the. Can you hear me? Yes. Is first of all, consumers and users of this technology, whatever it is, whether citizens or public administrations, have to, first of all, understand the technology. Secondly, once they've understood, they have to trust it. So even if they do understand it, they actually trust it's going to be effective. But even if they trust it, having now begun to understand it, there's a question of resistance, right? Acceptability, either because that they themselves, especially public administrations, resist it, or because they're reflecting, or they're on the receiving end of interest group, for example, concerns that Robert mentioned in his presentation. The declaration, of all the presentations so far, maybe your presentation fits most closely with the objectives of the declaration being signed today. How you sort of talked about things that are going according to plan, and the Gateway is maybe nonetheless a very important objective of yours. But how confident are you that the declaration plus this particular specific example will reinforce each other? That with this, what the benefits seem self-evident according to your data, but how confident are you that it'll become a reality?
I am convinced that it will become a reality.
Yeah.
Not a reliability. Because we see the process. Everybody more and more people are going, and some countries are very much advanced. And you know, Estonia is the classical example, already classical, where a lot of online procedures are there. we still see the problem with the cross-border aspects of it. I think that we all, and the declaration and all these work streams, they go in the same direction. We will have to convince and show that there are the advantages there for the users, be it businesses, be it citizens, that all this work will facilitate their life. And we have to show them by offering them solutions that are so easy, so simple to manage, that they say, yes, of course I will do it now from home, and I will save going to the office, I will do it from home.
Okay, things. Great optimism. Any more questions from the audience before you, sir? Yes, wait for the microphone, please. And as usual, give your name and organization.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Mike Bracken from Public Digital. I used to run the UK's government digital service. I think this is vital and fascinating, and that you're taking risk at this point is to your great credit. May I ask how you've identified the needs of users and what research you have done and will do to design this service?
There were a lot of public surveys. We talked with stakeholders during a quite long, year-long process, more than 1 year, of preparing the legislative proposals, because we want to get it right from the start. Of course, like every Commission proposal is open to be even further improved by the discussions in the European Parliament and the Member States. But the surveys helped us in particular, and our many talks with the Member States, with other stakeholders, helped us to identify the 13 procedures that businesses and citizens are telling us, have told us, that they are particularly relevant for them, and where they see the biggest benefits for them, and where they will really do things digital and have an easier life as a consequence.
Okay. Any more questions before I move to the next speaker? No? Well, in that case, please give a big round of applause to Hubert.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hubert. And now it gives me great pleasure to welcome to stage Edmunds Belskis, who's been working on his presentation for the past 20 minutes. I'm sure you're fine-tuning it. His presentation is called Data-Driven Nation and Tools. As you know, Edmunds is the Deputy State Secretary for ICT at the Ministry of Environmental Protection and Regional Development of the Republic of Latvia. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And at first, I'd like to thank Estonian presidency and all staff which is involved in this organization. I came on Wednesday, and we had a CEO for member states, CEO for ICT, and we had this shared meeting, and we were sharing experience, what kind of the best practice each member state has in e-governance. And after we shared this best practice for each member state, we had a number of examples we share the success stories from each member state, and then we go to the further development. We have to interconnect these excellent examples, and we saw today about single gateway, about Finnish and Estonian experience. We had brilliant examples from France about open data portal. Luxembourg presented brilliant ideas how to improve personal identification systems and so on. So, speaking about today's presentation, I would like to show the showcase of Latvia, how we provided this evaluation of existing e-governance, ICT sector and academia, what is the best practice in each of these sectors, and how can we make these separate parts of our society work together to get better and fruitful results and bring added value for society, as well for the e-governance, as well for private sector, and increase volume of export for ICT. So that's why during the last year, according to the decree or polite invitations from the Prime Minister. We analyze it and make a deep analysis of different data available and information for citizens. Are they publicly available or are they closed for the citizens? Is there demand for particular data sets? So data has become a new currency and needs to be transformed into income for both for the industry, for citizens, as well for the specific smart industries. So there is a massive data volume that concerns rights of individuals, involvement in processes moved by government, and society wants to be more involved in the decision-making process, not only during the final stage when officials are voting for proposals, but they want to be considered as partners to questions concerning finance and education. To create more effective solution, both added value and gain a bigger profit, so we saw that companies, scientists, and government representatives need more integration and cooperation. There were innovations, there were products, but we have to join these efforts together. So the government, as my minister, digital minister, responsible for e-governance, decided to go together with an industry representative from ICT sector, academia, to make this joint project. So we were looking and analyzing situation we are facing and challenging by the development of new technologies, bringing us to consider innovative management tools within the government and make a breakthrough on the way we cooperate and collaborate between stakeholders. We have Internet of Things, more and more products are online and had to become a data producers. We have big data, there is so much information on table which must be acquired. As well, we have to take into account a very important aspect of GDPR and other obstacles that we need to deal with the privacy of individuals during this process. And of course, we bring cloud computing as a very effective and user-friendly solution for data storage for the necessary information. So, about Latvia, we were looking for preconditions we have to facilitate this cooperation and building up cooperative ecosystem. So we have supporting flexible government. So we have support from the Prime Minister, from the President, as well. All initiatives are supported. Strong ICT capacity. So we have excellent results in ICT infrastructure. We have innovative and primary condition from the government, from a legislative part of view, and the government of Latvia currently passes a special tax regime which will effectively attract venture capital investor money in Latvia for startup development, and other initiatives are in the pipeline. As well, incredible IT growth. We looking for the last several years. IT export growth in average 23% every year. So government decided to step in this process to help industry cooperate with the scientists and governmental bodies. And government is looking to grow ICT industry and science with a goal to create new innovative products and services that can be used both in public and private sector. Since we were aware that data is a new oil, we have already identified primary data sets that needs to be open to public and as open data. By the way, we launched this year the Open Data Portal, and calculating open data sets, we calculated some 400 data sets will be available in the near future via this Open Data Portal. To make synergy even more involving, we have also different ministries on board. For example, Ministry of Economics, which is responsible for development of entrepreneurship environment, startups, and financing those activities. So the government in this project will be as a launch pad for innovative projects, and during cooperation between private sector and government, the government agencies will open their resources and information that newly initiated IT project, which is not formed as like as a exportable product, can be launched and tested on the governmental body. Afterwards, we decide this agency uses this product, or afterwards a commercial organization can move this product to export markets. So, to formalize this initiative between government scientists and ICT sector, we signed a memorandum, which is called as a data-driven nation, just a slogan to facilitate understanding in society and industry, how can we going to improve our performance. At the end of the last year, this memorandum was signed by digital minister and the major ICT non-governmental organization, and in the beginning of this year we also this memorandum was joined by main academia, universities, private sector players from ICT industry. So during the opening of this conference where the memorandum was signed, the president of Latvia said during this process that it is impossible to be a part of labor market if you are not educated in ICT. World's economic is changing rapidly. All traditional economics branch is being replaced with a new ones connected with ICT and its usage. So giving us a strong political and visional view of future development. So the concept has three different pillars, and the first pillar is based on data democracy and accessibility, and it is basis for a more transparent public governance process, for a more active public participation in decision-making process, opening governmental data for development of new innovative business models, and for higher quality and public sector and business decision making. The second pillar is data-enabled citizen engagement. Public institutions will become an example for citizens and businesses as regards state-of-the-art communication and information exchange. To develop solutions and tools will be applicable both for public, non-governmental institutions and private sector. And the third pillar is more added value, creating pillar or commercialization, and all based on the first two pillars outcomes, the commercial organizations are commercializing products, bringing it to global market, and increasing added value to governmental for states GDP. So innovation platform or cooperation ecosystem, we tried to get everyone, and we got everyone behind the same table. And you see that there is a government, academia, and smart industries which will be facilitated by different procedures. And the governmental funds are allocated to all these stages to facilitate the process and development of new projects. And the main effort is on the cross-sectoral development, where ICT is bringing and providing help to increase effectiveness of different traditional industries, and later on I will show you some examples. So, and at the end, during this process for cross-sectoral cooperation, we're taking on board also the global players like Roche for biomedicine, Microsoft for different technologies. The platform is open, and we are discussing with Tesla and other big players which are bringing also this global technologies and thinking, and helping us to create create a new pilot projects, and at the end, in cooperation with those global players, we bring these pilot projects. They help us to scale them and bring to the international market. So, by the way, during this process, in cooperation with global players, we just 2 weeks ago we opened a regional for the North Europe University of Latvia and Microsoft Regional Innovation Center in Riga, and we see the fact that only innovation center in this Northern Europe is open exactly in Riga can be looked as a proof of approval from the global player looking at this innovative platform. So some user cases how we using this already existing innovation platform gained a pilot project which help us to increase also the e-governance performance in the future using the newest technologies, and one of the cases is where artificial intelligence is used. We have really accumulated outstanding expertise in artificial intelligence in Latvia. For example, language technologies is language technology company, one of them, Tilde, is among European leaders in essential artificial intelligence technologies like neural networks, spoken languages, communication, natural language processing, and conversation interfaces. So how can we use artificial intelligence in service for data-driven this concept? We can create potentials to put artificial intelligence in the service, implementing those ideas. Public administration provides a lot of information, data online in different single access point portals and so on. There is many e-services provided, but for many users it is not always easy to find information about public services. Artificial intelligence can make government data more accessible and used. It can help to turn data into answers, addressing questions. So we also created the virtual assistant platform, which is already used for and tested for different public services in a pilot project, for example, for libraries, and this virtual assistant called Laura is already working in the National Library, providing information, helping to find different information in this library. This product also is available in the Facebook, and my colleagues is saying that there is already 300,000 talks with Laura on the internet. So if you have time later on, you can try talk with a nice lady called Laura. The potential, how can we use this artificial intelligence and virtual assistants, we discussed 2 days ago with one state agency. They said they want to employ Laura as a permanent staff for the public service, and this organization, I cannot tell the name of organization, they want to be the first one in Latvia, also provides a huge number of cross-border services. So the virtual assistant and artificial intelligence help us also using this different language skills to provide services, not changing the system and the description of the services. So we are going to put the bots to the service of e-government. So And we want that those artificial intelligence and virtual assistants revolutionize the delivery and support of e-government services. We create a platform for a virtual assistant which will help public administration to better inform, support, and communicate with the public and provide us governmental services. As well, virtual assistants will help users to get answers to questions related to public service and public institutions, and access public sector information and to use public services as well. So one showcase where artificial intelligence and cross-sector cooperation helps us implement ICT newest technology is a machine translation for forestry. We have largest export industry as a forestry, and there is still big demand and it's increasing for the forestry products in the world. And to help or forestry industry, how make these products more exportable. We have introduced this machine translation for forestry industry, automatically helping translate different documents and export forms, product description to languages they are going, to countries they are going to. And this is a tool how can we use for cross-border cooperation. When you enter any public service portal, that kind of virtual assistance and machine translation technologies can help us much faster to receive services. And the second showcase we have about transportation and artificial intelligence usage in transportation system, where the two main aspects are very important: efficiency and mobility, and safety and security. How can we provide better organization of transportation system? Every year, road accidents kills 4,000 times more people than airplane crashes. So how can we save lives, and how can we make better our daily life, and how can we join all these goals together? So to do that, we use the Internet of Transportation systems. We have a lot of different old and new sensors. We have all data collected and fused, but we have to act, and building the artificial intelligence capacities and procedures related to insight and decision-making process, we can improve and decrease the number of accidents. So using historical free traffic flow records gathering by artificial intelligence helps smart traffic flow solutions optimize traffic lights and enforce public transportation. We can get a better result and decrease the number of time we spend in the travel, idling time, and cutting emissions by 20 up to 40%. So, and safety and security brings us a number where we got from the Latvian road traffic safety directors that next generation smart speed cameras with artificial intelligence system inside them, reduce number of cars, accident by 42%, injuries by 21%, and eliminate zero death at the hotspots where these cameras are located. So this network is powered by artificial intelligence hub using state-of-the-art and GiOT and neural network technologies, which help to using all this data every day to make this machine more clever and identify necessary information and models. And finally, I'd like to show a short video how this existing gadgets can be used implementing artificial intelligence to improve our lives.
Every year, more than 1 million people die worldwide because of auto accidents. That's equal to half the population of Latvia. In Latvia alone, there are around 4,000 auto accidents and 157 deaths yearly. The top reason for these deaths? Speeding. This is Laura. She enjoys going fast. Today, she was running late. What if we could turn back time and save her. Since 2016, next-generation speed cameras with future intelligent transport systems have been installed throughout Latvia. The cameras detect speed limit violations and capture both photo and video evidence of the offending vehicle. From this moment, the Microsoft Cloud and built-in machine learning magic begins. First, an intelligent download mechanism sends the data to the cloud. Then, a proprietary deep neural network recognizes the vehicle type and its number plate. Afterwards, the information is pre-processed and sent off to a law enforcement agency. As a result, the entire workflow is fully automated. Thanks to Microsoft Azure, this process not only requires little human intervention, but also shortens a process that once took hours down to within a few seconds. But most importantly, this solution contributes to saving lives. Statistics prove that since their installation, there has been a 42% decrease in serious traffic accidents, a 21% decrease in injuries, and 0 deaths in the hotspots where speed cameras have been placed. Drive safe. Your future depends on it.
So, finalizing my presentation, the message is that it's important to make new technologies and artificial intelligence to serve all citizens of Europe, make e-government and cross-border services more accessible and usable. Thank you very much.
Stay there. Don't move, Edmonds. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Okay, well, fair enough. Gentleman here, could you come forward with the microphone, please? I normally ask the first question, but I should not monopolize the speaker. And as usual, say your name and organization. Here's the microphone.
Jaak Vilo, University of Tartu, head of the computer science department. You mentioned collaboration with academia. Can you elaborate on how do you actually engage with academia in this research area?
Yes. Hopefully, or by the way, persons who are leading ICT non-governmental organization are the same persons who are leading universities, research institutes. It's a one. But from the practical point of view, we are making those cross-sectoral working groups. For example, the forestry and ICT sector. In the biomedicine, we have a cancer prediction project with Roche and Latvian University and hospitals, and as well some legal advisors, how to make, and of course ICT, and using the big data analysis to make the model for gene sequences and getting out this breakthrough in technology, how to do that. Yep. It's a humans, but we are bringing them together and we unify with a single goal we want to reach. And of course, as I mentioned, for each of these processes, we're trying also get some financing that covers necessary costs for research activities, improving ICT systems as well.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? I have a question, Edmonds. In both sessions, this one, you and Patrick, in the first session, we had, in effect, a national government representative. And you both highlighted the importance of the essential need to have public-private cooperation. And you had slides, both you, with logos of private sector entities helping you to do some of the stuff you're doing. But I talked earlier, when I asked questions to Hubert and to Robert, example, this issue of trust, but also between private sector players who are trying to sell services and make money, and public administration on the other. How do you make sure, and frankly, maybe not you personally, but often civil servants are known as not maybe understanding technology as much as they might when commissioning and when buying the services of these private sector entities. So to what extent do you think there's a danger, there's a bit of a disconnect or a different approach? The companies want to sell their services, and their consumers, in this case people like yourself, although not you personally, I stress, do not understand sufficiently well what is being offered.
Good question. At first, we put the interest of the state as a first, and meaning and saying interest of the state, we look at the citizens, and we are considering what kind of services they need for daily life or for maybe for the future. They don't know at the moment, but we as a public servant, we must predict the next step of development of public services as well, and then we take on board for this discussion to be neutral, the non-governmental organizations representing both ICT sector and sometimes some tricky questions we put on the table of a council of non-governmental body, so they fight to each other what is a medium approach and understanding from this non-governmental association. Of course, and the second part is to take on board also representative from the society, from different types of society. They are bringing us their needs, their daily needs, and then we combine the expectation, needs, and future vision.
Okay, thank you. If there are no more questions before we break for lunch, any more questions? Okay, well, a big round of applause for Edmunds, please. We now break for lunch, and I've been asked, thank you, Edmunds. We now break for lunch. I've been asked to point out that we reconvene for the plenary sessions in the power station, which is the big room down the hall to the left of the registration desk. You can't miss it. Okay, thank you. Bon appétit.